So we just start by letting the feet spread and soften, getting in behind the balls of the feet and letting the toes spread. And we could just roll the feet onto their outer edges and onto their inner edges and just allow the ankles to start to soften. And we want the front of the ankle to soften back into the heel. And when we roll the feet onto their outer edges and back in again, what we find is that the tissues on the front of the shins can start to slide and glide. The muscles on the back of on the calves can start to slide and glide over each other, and we want that. It's useful. So we just start to let things move. We've got mobile bones in the shin. One of them is static, the other one is not. And we want to feel that freedom, because as we start to soften through the ankle, we start to create space into the knee. And around the front side of the knees, and then into the back of the knee, which is useful. So we just feel the ground with the feet and just noticing the texture of the mat underneath your toes. Noticing how the heel connects with the floor. Can we feel more of the inner edge, or more of the outer edge, more of the back edge? Can we drop into that? So as we let the drawbridge of the sacrum just roll away and the sit bones get pulled down into the ground, we can start to reset the pelvis or rework the pelvis, so it starts to come back into its optimal arrangement. We want the pelvis to be rolling away. We spend too long with our tails tucked under, so can we let that just start to drop away from the back of the legs? We start to create space between sort of the top of the hamstring and the connection of the pelvis. So can we feel that then we get more of a connection down through the center point of the foot? Noticing if one hip is heavier than the other, and just starting to pull the feet down into the ground. So as we pull the feet down into the ground, can we just come in through the inside back of the pelvis into the deep waist? And it's the beginnings of something that feels like a bridge pose, but without too much of a pelvic tilt. So we're very used to sort of tilting the pelvis in towards us, rolling the pelvis in towards us, and of course that causes muscles at the top of the legs to work. But can we just feel that there's a pull through the feet, which takes us in through the hip bones into the deep waist, and the knees go forwards towards the end of your mat, which just starts to take us up towards something that looks like our bridge pose. And it's useful because it takes us up into the underside of the solar plexus and starts to create space there. And then through the inside back of the ribs, and that pulls the shoulder blades down into the ground. So depending on where your arms are. Maybe they're down by the side of the body, or maybe they're over your body. Starts to draw the arms back through the sockets into the spine, creating space. The voice box can drop back, and the back of the head can drop. So being mindful of when you come back down to the ground, as much as when you're going up towards the sky, that we just keep that lengthening quality to our bridge pose. So we're creating space between each individual vertebrae, plugging the legs back in through the hips into the underside of the ribs. It might be that the arms can start to come up over the head towards the floor behind you. And we start to create space into the underarms, and then through the backside of the arm into the elbows. So the elbows can become quite heavy, quite open. The palms can be quite heavy and quite open. And this takes the arms out of the solar plexus and starts to create space into the ribs. And we're always sinking the ribs back into the spine. And sending ourselves back into the back body, so always reconnecting back into the spine. And as always, you can make these movements as static or as dynamic as you want them to be, depending on how you feel. So we just keep sinking that solar plexus back. For those of us that practice yoga, we would call this Uddiyana Bandha. It appears spontaneously here as the legs pull away from the solar plexus in one direction and the diaphragm lifts in up underneath the ribs. So there's almost a hollowing out that happens at the tummy. And it may be for some of us that are a little bit further on that we start to, at this point, bring the palm of a hand into the ground at the side of the shoulder. Doesn't matter which way the fingers want to go. Maybe that's looking back towards the shoulder or maybe out to the side, doesn't matter. But we're just starting to feel that fingers can have space between each individual joint. And then that center part of the hand that we were working with before starts to open to the ground. And we get we're setting ourselves up for a bridge pose with our arms, but at the other end of the body, so the palm pulls down into the ground, and then the elbow will go towards the top of the mat, which will take the ribs off the floor. And if you're just working with your bridge at the moment, then that's absolutely fine. These things tend to happen spontaneously for themselves as part of the journey, part of getting to know ourselves. We're looking for the legs to pull out of the deep waist to create length to the deep waist. And this gives us a deep sense of strength to those postural muscles, to those core muscles. And then hands just pulling down into the ground, which gives us space into the wrist, space into the elbow, and then space into the underarm. The arms are always looking to connect back into solar plexus, of course they are, and the head as well. So the head comes from between the shoulder blades and out through the inside of the neck. We can follow that passageway, if you like, of the neck into the underside of the head. Starts to create a spaciousness, but also a sensitivity to that part of the body. Tend to be a little bit sleepy in the upper ribs and the neck spine. So just using the arms and the head to reconnect into there and then create a spaciousness. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to be looking at. So just being mindful if the hands are coming up to the side of the top of the shoulder, we want to keep the elbows in the peripheral vision. We want them in line with the shoulders as much as we can. There's nothing wrong with the elbows going out to the side. It's just a different dynamic. It will take you into the top of the shoulder. So when we feel like, if the hands are up at the shoulders, we feel like we've got a beach ball between the elbows and we want to grip our beach ball. Yes, much better, Sandra. And you'll feel the back side of the arms. Now, traditionally, or can't think of the word, but for many of us, the back side of the arms, the triceps, are quite weak. Not something that we utilise, or a muscle group that we utilise particularly. So can we grip our beach ball? So more grip on the beach ball even than that, Lisa. Let the shoulder blades broaden on the back of the body. And then you'll find the thumbs and the index fingers will come down into the ground more. Yeah, it's better. It's challenging for shoulders. So if it's not quite there for you yet, or you've got shouldery things going on, just be patient with yourself. Hello, Margaret.
Hello. I've got really bad sciatic pain today.
Okay, yes. Yes, do let me know about these things because we can give you something to do with that for sure. So, are you comfortable laying on your back or not really?
Well, yes, but it's when I try to do something, you know, when I'm going up.
Yeah.
It really gets in the middle of my back.
Yeah, yep. Okay, so, and it's such a, funnily enough, you're the second person this week with sciatic pain and it's only Wednesday. So it's going around. It's absolutely, blame it on the weather. So when we're working with sciatic pain, the best place for our hands then is front of the ribs. So bring the hands into the front of the ribs and we're going to smooth the ribs down towards the pelvis and we're going to smooth the ribs back towards the spine, and that helps the low spine to start to relax down. So we're going to plant the left foot into the ground and let that get pulled down and rolling the drawbridge of the pelvis away. We've got those lovely heavy sit bones. And then all we do with the right knee can float in towards us. We've got the ribs coming back. We can leave one hand on the ribs. We'll get a little bit manual with this one. One hand on the front of the ribs, smoothing the ribs back towards the spine. And then we're going to put a finger in the front crease of the hip of the right side, and we want the thigh to go up and over that finger that's in the crease, so we're not squashing our finger there. And we let the long leg bone drop back into, if we imagine that we're planting plants, so we've got this lovely long thigh bone that's planted through the soil of the pelvis into the ground, and we can let that float in. And all we're going to do is we're just going to let the knee rotate out to look at the side of the mat, and then rotate in towards the center line. Now the back of the body doesn't move. We keep sinking back through the solar plexus, that T12 point. We've got a gravity button underneath that mid-back spine, pulling down into the ground, and we're letting the pelvis roll away. So we've got that going in the two directions, and then that just starts to free that leg so that we've got that lovely rotation in the ball and socket joint of the hip. You know, when it's cold or we feel cold, the tendency is that the head comes forward and the shoulders come up around the ears, because, you know, we feel, nobody ever walked out into the cold weather like, oh, it's very bracing today with the shoulders down and the head back. The head is always forwards and the shoulders up. So how do we unwind this? We let the jaw be free, let the voice box be free, the ribs coming back and in. We want that length to the spine because we want to unfurl the spine. And then we're going to free the legs from the hip socket. So we do one side and then the other, and just notice what's happening in the back part of the hip, back part of, you know, underneath the glute where the sciatic nerve sits. But it tends to be, and I know Margaret super well, so, you know, I know where we're looking for sciatic nerve there. We're just looking for a little bit more space in the low spine. So we're feeling that the tummy can just settle back and drop back. And we'll change over the legs when it feels good. So there's a freeing at the hip that can be had there. You know, if your bridge is causing you compression or is exacerbating your compression in the low spine, then we leave that alone. We'll go to something else. So it's a good thing to do, Margaret. Does that help?
Yeah, but I'm getting cramp in that left hip just there.
Yeah, as the scar tissue frees up. So keep the foot nice and active. You want the foot spreading nicely. We put our heel in the heel hammock, sky hammock, and let that hang. Collarbones feel like they're going to slide off the edges of the shoulders. And the ribs can soften and soften and soften. Keep into the front of the ribs. We'll keep smoothing them back and down. Because, you know, a lot of our, you know, the hip connections are sort of in the side of the ribs and up underneath the shoulder blade. So the more we let that soften back, then it lets the tissues. And the tissues will sort themselves out. So we're just working through that, keeping that free. And as soon as that side's had enough, we move into the other one. And it may be that we don't stay in that one side for very, very long at all. So if you're working with your bridge pose into your wheel pose, you're doing great. I can see you and I'm keeping an eye on you. Sandra, it looks good. Sarah Jane, it's looking better and better. So Ronnie, bring your feet in a little bit more towards you. Just give yourself a nice base to work from. That's it. And then that will give you a bit more of the front of the snooker ball heel. Oh, Diana, you look like you're dressed for the Arctic, my love. You and Lisa are going for matchy woolens this week. So, and it is unseasonably cold, so we let the body respond in its own time. we're going to come back down. When we're ready, I'm just bringing the knees in, giving the knees a nice hug, and we're going to have a little rock from side to side. So we're just planting the back of the, like I say, the back of the pelvis. If we think about the whole pelvis as like a plant pot, we plant the thigh bones into there. We're just going to feel that the right foot can get pulled down into the ground and the left knee can come in towards you just a little bit. We've got the heel in that hammock, that sky hammock, so that the leg can really feel like it can hang back into the socket and then down into the ground. We're always thinking about limbs connecting about 3 feet underneath us. So can we take the big toe joint and just make figure of 8? Can we draw a figure of 8 with our big toe joint? We're going to go in one direction. And again, we're keeping the ribs back towards the spine, collarbones that feel like they can slide off the edges of the shoulders. And then we're going to take our figure of 8 in the other direction. And this helps the leg to reconnect to the deep central core muscles and starts to bypass the hip just a little bit. So going in the other direction might be tricky, might require a little bit more brain power, concentration. And then we're going to bring that foot down. We're going to change over sides. So just allowing the left foot to be pulled down into the ground, back of the pelvis again, is that lovely soil that we're going to plant the legs into. And the heel goes into that lovely sky hammock, and we can create or draw those figure of 8 shapes. So just noticing how the toes feel as they connect into the heel. And then we're going to go in the other direction if you haven't already. And then bringing that foot all the way back down and coming down into the ground. So we're just planting the feet into the ground. You can have elbows either side of you, just coming into your laying twist. So we're just pulling the feet into the ground, plugging the legs into the underside of the ribs. If it's nice to have a hand on the front of the ribs, it's useful, particularly if you know that you flare the ribs, because we always want that length to the low waist, that length to the low spine. And the sit bones being pulled away towards the end of your mat. We're drawing the legs back through the sockets of the hips and coming over to the other side. And then we're going to come back to the centre. We're going to give the knees a nice hug. Have a little rock from side to side. then we're going to come over into our lovely square pose. So have your chair somewhere at the end of your mat. So it's finding the options that are right for you with these. That's fine. So again, just arranging yourself so that the pointy parts of the elbows are looking back, the long arm bones are coming back into the sockets, and feeding the spine so we get that lovely broadness to the ribs. And we can lift and drop the ribs easily. Shoulder blades can slide and glide. And again, you know, if we've got cramping in the legs, using the shoulder blade to slide up towards the ear and then back down towards the rib will help you with whatever's going on in the legs and in the feet. And we start to be able to touch in with the inside front of the spine. So we're interested in, yes, it's very nice to lift everything up towards the sky, and that's the natural orientation that we find with our cat pose. But as we start to come back down through, can we feel that the back of the head is being pulled away towards the top of the wall in front of you? It feels like the front of the chest, the heart center, is being pulled forwards towards the wall in front of you. It's almost like you're trying to show somebody a beautiful necklace that you're wearing. Collarbones feel like they can slide off the edges of the shoulders, but the feet are pulling down into the ground, so we're not dropping into the low spine. We've got that broadness on the back of the ribs, and everything is just being pulled forwards from the heart and the lungs going forwards. And then as we draw the jaw into the back of the head, we've got an opportunity to make space in the underside of the skull. And then all the way down the inside of the neck. And through down the inside of the spine all the way into the pelvis. So we start to feel that lovely spaciousness, but we can feel the connections of the legs as we walk down through the inside of the spine into the underside of the ribs, and we're in the top of the lumbars. We can feel that draws the legs. As the spine lifts there, we can feel that gives a freedom to the front of the hip and the knee as it comes into the ground. We feel more of the hands into the ground, so the higher the ribs are, the heavier the hands are on the ground. And conversely, when we go in the other direction in our cat pose and we start taking our heart center forwards, the hands become lighter on the ground, the feet become a little bit lighter on the ground, everything starts to get drawn in. So we've got an idea we've got an idea of where we want to be when it comes to moving hands and feet. So we pull down with both feet. And we pull down with both hands. And we start to feel that the knees can become a little bit freer. We've got a weight into the top of the shins. So can we start to slide a knee in towards us? And just noticing initially, it's quite a small movement, just lets the foot slide, the top of the foot slide over the mat. And we just want to stay out of the top of the shoulders. We want to keep the driver for this into the solar plexus. So it feels like we're almost reeling in the leg from the underside of the ribs. And this takes us into the obliques and the central core system. So like I say, it's quite a small movement. Notice if you throw your body weight forwards into the shoulders, can we leave it back into the underside of the rib? Leave the jaw wrapped around the back of the head. If we've got a nice long neck, we want space between the shoulder blades. So we're just reattaching the leg to the inside of the spine. And we might find that one side is easier than the other. And for those of us that are very flexible, just keep an eye on the elbows, making sure that we're not locking out through there. So it may be that if you're happy here with the hands underneath the shoulders, you might start to introduce the toes into the ground. If it's easier to bring the hands up in front of you, how do you put it? The chair is not really for leaning on. It's a support. So it's different. So when you've got your hands on your chair, we're not collapsing into our chair. It could be that, we can always lift our hands away from the chair. So if we've got our hands on the chair, we can feel sit bones in a sling, which gives us a nice lift. We start to lift the pelvis off the legs. And we feel that we've got this lovely lift into the pelvic floor, into the front of the tummy. And we're staying in that center chalky line that we create down the center of ourselves. So we're not throwing the body weight too much over to one side. If we can help it, it's practice, not perfect. We just start to slide the legs through. And like I say, they're different, slightly different experiences. So if you're working with hands on the floor, it's absolutely fine. If this is part of your personal practice, if you have a home practice, then it's great to try between the two because they're just different experiences. And this helps our brains to understand that your leg doesn't finish at your hip. It is connected and is an integral part of the waist. I do need to make a video at some point of all the people on my screens right now who are trying to do their movements around animals. It's quite hilarious. There are cats and dogs all over the show. And I love the fact we can't move the animal, we move round the animal. You gotta love humans. So we're making this movement nice and slow. We keep plugging the legs back into the ribs. Keep the head in, keep the jaw around the head, keep the head in. So Debbie, maybe slightly closer to your chair, lovely. Give yourself a base to work from. Knees a little bit wider apart. That's it, and that's going to give you the foundation that you're looking for, because the arms pulling through into the ribs will support you. The head into the heart center will support you. We need to do animals of Instagram, animals of TGT calendar next year or something. So if your leg is coming through easily and you're happy here, we can start to work with, whether hands on the floor or hands on the chair, whichever. When the hands are on the chair, we have to work a little bit harder to lift the ribs out of the waist. But as we start to, we can bring the back toes into the ground. And it's just the toes pulling down into the ground. And it might be that that's enough, that the toes just pull into the ground and that pulls the heel back towards the wall behind you. It may be, for some of us, that the heel keeps pulling back towards the wall behind you and it'll take the knee off the floor. And then we can come back down in the same way that we came up. So we start to look at our lunge position just a little bit more and a little bit more. So we feel that the back heel is pulling the leg away, but it's pulling the leg out of the side of the waist, out of the side of the ribs. It becomes a body-wide event. We start to understand that legs cover a good half of our body, a good half of our spine. Arms cover the whole spine. How are we doing? We're having fun. So we start to feel that the feet are the drivers behind the two. And then for those of us that have been practicing a little longer, we start to take the hands out of the equation. Exactly that, Lisa. So maybe the hands come onto the chair and then maybe the hands start to rise, but that's because the arms are plugging in through the shoulders and they're lifting the ribs off the waist. Yes, much better. Yeah. So they lift the ribs off the waist and we start to come through and up. For the rest of us mere mortals, we may be just back down on the floor with the hands on the chair, and that's okay. Because it's like growing plants. It takes time. Keep plugging ourselves back into the ground. So we're soft through the foot. Can we make circles with the heel and keep the space behind the balls of the feet and the other end of your foot? The heel, yes, that bit. How are you getting on, Sarah Jane? You all right?
Yes, I think I'm tired. I think I'm tired now. I can't. I need to leave that exercise alone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard work. This stuff is, it's tough on the central core system. So if you are tired today, then rest when you need to, for sure.
I certainly can feel, advanced improvement from last year to this year. With my core.
Yeah.
So I'm getting stronger.
Yeah, they're big muscles. They do take time. Just been discussing this with someone actually. They're just ticking a year of regular daily exercise. They've been going to the gym and doing this movement and other bits and pieces. And it's terrible marketing results in 12 months. But that's kind of it takes time for the body to respond, because we don't want to build muscle quickly because we want to retain it. And we want an intelligence to that muscle. So it's really good to hear that though, Sarah Jane. And you feel it. It comes through in lots of different ways in your life as well. You feel more steady and more stable when we feel stronger inside.
Yes, and it just at a time when I've been working through solar plexus stuff in the last couple of years.
For sure.
As we all do, but subconsciously,
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I think we're all working through are we just working through the crap at the moment? Yeah, I think we're all working through the crap. Everybody's wading through lots of rubbish at the moment. It will pass. That's great, Lisa. So then just taking that back heel away, and then you'll feel that will open the back of the knee and make you fall out of the posture. I'm sorry. It's an interesting one because this is where the hip flexor at the front has to relax and release and give way to the inside back of the hip. So what we find is when where are we? Something like, I want that one at the back. So when we're here and the heel pulls away, it's taking the leg from the underside of the rib and it's lengthening away. And the reason that we want that is because if we push with the foot, it'll put us into the front leg, and that's an awful lot of work, and the front leg starts to shake. So when we've got the back foot pulling, it starts to pull the back of the knee open, pulls the front of the hip open, but it takes the body weight back. So we stay, if we draw a chalky line down through the centre of us, we stay between both legs equally. It's a lot of work for this front thigh into front of the hip. And one side, again, may be more compliant than the other. We want to keep the knees squeezing the beach ball to the centre. So if I go this way, it's my own personal one. We might find that as the foot goes back, we've got knees going in opposite directions. We want to keep them coming into the centre line. So we're always drawing in and up, drawing in and up. This looks much better. So again, we're connecting the leg through the pelvis into the deep waist. It's hard work. It's good. Ribs coming in towards the spine, Diana. Jaw into the back of the head. Get that nice lift up, 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 out of the waist. And the arms will follow it. Yeah. It's like arms are interesting. They're like the ripple effect that come up out of the legs. They're a spontaneous, if that makes any sense at all. A spontaneous, there's a technical term for you. This is good. So we're coming up to standing when you're ready, and take your time. And we're going to have the back of the chair looking back towards us. So we can make nice circles with the heels and just spread the feet. And we always want that, because when we've got these lovely spreading feet, then this helps us with the tissues around the knees, and it helps us with the tissues around the hips. And just noticing where the body weight falls into the centre of the foot. So we want to be even between toes and heels and the inner and outer edges of the feet. And if we bring our hands onto the back of our chair, and again, a little bit like what we want to cultivate is a reciprocal connection between whatever we touch. So as the foot comes down into the floor, it feeds the leg back into the deep waist. As the hand comes onto the back of the chair, as we touch into the back of the chair, there's a reciprocal feed that comes back up through the arm and feeds the arm back into the spine. It's a little bit like, we were talking about this the other day, you know, jellyfish. There's a contraction in that then allows the jellyfish to balloon out. And humans are the same. We're always in this inwards and outwards state, this contracting and expanding nature of ourselves all the time. So we're always looking to feed the limbs back to the spine, and the spine responds by allowing the limbs more space, more length, more expansion. It doesn't serve us well to be permanently in a contractile nature, because that's what pulls our head and our tail under and sends us towards the floor. But equally, we don't want to always be in an expansive nature, because that's just going to become unstable at some point. So it's finding the balance between the two. So as we find the feet into the floor and we find the hands into the back of the chair, and we feed everything back into the spine, head, arms and legs, we start to feel that as the feet pull down into the ground, exactly as we were doing with the foot behind, centre of the foot pulls down into the ground, which pulls the back of the knee open, which lifts the sit bone. So we start to create space. There's a spaciousness in the front of the ankle, the back of the knee and the front of the hip. And we start to get a degree of separation between the top of the leg and the pelvis. For most of us, it's a little bit close coupled, which is why often we put a finger in the front of this crease on the front of the hip, because we want that. We want the support of the pelvis to be coming from the inside of the pelvis and the tummy, not from the hip. So the more we get into this, the more we feel the sit bones can lift, the more it starts to look a little bit like a forward bend. And we feel again that the tail can get drawn towards the wall behind you. It's going to be challenging for the hamstrings on the back, and that's okay. And we've got the pointy parts of the elbows that get pulled down towards the ground, because that sends the long arm bone back through the shoulders into the ribby spine, into the inside of the neck, and allows the crown of the head to start to go away towards the top of the wall in front of you. So a little bit like our cat pose, we end up going in the two directions at once. And this gives us space. It gives us space into the underarm and sends the ribs back towards the legs, which then sends the pelvis, the sit bones, back towards the wall behind you. And we'll have to start walking back at some point. Because we're getting pulled in the two directions by the head and the pelvis. And we feel that there's a lot of space into the underarm and into the side of the ribs. So keep coming back to that centre of the foot, very, very centre of the hip. So making circles with the heels, Lisa, if it's grievous in the back of the legs, and yes, come out and rest when you need to. So when we're coming out to rest, we're letting the tail drop, we let the pelvis swing through, which brings the head up, and we come back up to standing with our counterweights bringing us through back into the gravity line. Yeah, it looks good, Ronnie. We feel more of our solar plexus when we do that, because we feel like the pelvis and the head are orbiting around the solar plexus. And then they're not so heavy on the body anymore. And keep pulling the heel down into the ground so that the back of the knee can open. You might find at some point that the hands start to leave the back of the chair, at which point maybe the pointy part of the elbow connects with the front of the thigh. We're always looking for that feedback of the arm back through the shoulder into the spine. And this takes the load out of the back of the pelvis. Hello, Ronnie.
Just trying to find the unmute button. Sorry, you lost me at that last bit where you said the arms could come off.
Yeah, so we'll get to a point where we're sort of around here somewhere. And when the pelvis is pulling back and we've got enough space in the underarm and the side of the ribs, I'm going to run out of road at some point. So, we don't want to be, for those of us that are very flexible, hanging through here is not good for us. So we get to this point where the arms become free. So maybe the elbow starts to connect with the front of the thigh. It might be the hands, doesn't matter which, because we're looking for that feedback of the arms back through the socket. And this is where, our forward bend starts to turn into something else, because we're going to, at some point, end up here. But the difference with this movement is it's very easy for us to hang off the back of the pelvis. And if I can do it, I haven't done it for so long now, but we can hang off the back of the pelvis, and you can see now that this is round and it's too long. So we start here with our freedom to the sit bones, which means the length is coming from the hamstrings and the back of the body. The strength is on the inside of the, you can see here, this Uddiyana Bandha that we talk about in yoga, where the whole lot just gets sucked back into the spine. So there's no load into the back of into the sacroiliac at all here, because the arms feed into the ribs, so the ribs come forwards, the head feeds into between the shoulders, which takes all of this bit forwards. The fact that we come down is incidental, and the legs are always pulling down through the centre of the foot, feeds the leg back into the this bit here, and turns us into a, just like that, she says. No pressure, Ronnie, off you go.
It looks really good when you do it.
I've done it a couple of times before. It's an interesting one, this one, because, you know, it's a terrible name, forward bend, because it gives us this idea that we want to throw ourselves forwards and off the cliff. And actually, this is probably one of the movements where we are contracting back in more strongly than any other movement, because we really need that inner spine support to keep us out of, you know, loading because, you know, the front of the body's coming forwards and it's heavy. So if there isn't inner support, then just the top of the body hangs off the back of the pelvis, and we know over time that isn't useful, particularly for women. It starts messing around with sacroiliac joints. So we keep the legs feeding back through the inside of the inside back of the pelvis, inside front of the spine into the diaphragm, and that supports the spine so it feels suspended. Looks really good, Margaret. Looks really good. It's good. A little bit more toes, Lisa. I'm going to be super picky with you because you've been here a while, so such a minor point. Noticing where we are in the feet and using the feet as an interface to get us back into the low spine again and again. You all right there, Pam? You having a little rest, lovely? And do rest if you need to. I know there's an astrological shit show going up in the sky at the moment, and for many of us we're finding it a little bit challenging, so...
I just peaked.
You just peaked? Yeah, exactly that.
But the length that you feel actually in the back of the pelvis.
Yeah.
And then when you come up to standing, you've got, I'm feeling the space at the front.
Yeah.
Having lengthened at the back, so I'm quite liking that.
Yeah.
But then it's just like that's enough for today.
And you know, and that's it's a really good point as well, Pam, because when we're working with the connective tissue in this way, and I've been chatting this through with my teacher a lot, things like noticing that you know the rebalancing in the body that we feel when we created a little bit more length into the hamstrings and into those tissues, and then how the front of the leg has to respond and how the hip flexor and the front of the hip gets involved. The feedback back to the brain from your connective tissue about what's going on in there is huge. It's like a huge fire hydrant of information. And depending on what we're dealing with in our external environment and our life in general, we may have bandwidth, we may have a limited bandwidth for that kind of information. You know, for the moment, for me, my practice is really, really small because my bandwidth for feedback from the body is quite limited, and I find it very tiring. So I'm doing a little bit in the morning and then going and having a little nap. Don't tell anyone. You know, because this is how how things are at the moment. So other times when we haven't got a lot going on in our life, we can yoga ourselves away all the time because we've got the capacity for going, oh yeah, that's interesting. Things are moving around. So this is where it's so important to listen to ourselves. But the rebalancing in the tissues of the legs is great. It's a really useful thing. So yes, we're going to come down to laying. If you haven't already, there's quite a few people who have preempted me there, and yeah, I'm good now. Which is great because it means that you're getting the message that the teacher within you is the one you want to listen to, not the other one. So just taking that time to let the body rest and process. And if it's nice to just bring the hands onto the tummy and just breathing into your hands, breathing into your tummy. So the tummy expands on the in-breath, and as you breathe out, tummy just sinks back. And we feel that deeper connection to the ground. And just feeling that the earth comes up to support you as the gravity draws you down and supports you. So we've kind of got this sandwich going on, sandwich effect between support underneath us from the earth and support of the gravity coming down from the sky. And can we relax into that? We don't have to do as much as we think we do. So we're just giving our fingers and toes a wiggle and making some rotations with the wrists and the ankles. And we're taking the arms up over the head and the legs long. For a nice stretch through your body. And bringing the knees up to the chest, give the knees a nice hug. Have a little rock from side to side. Coming over onto whichever side is comfortable for you, returning back to sitting in your own time. Just taking a moment to check in with yourself and notice how you feel. Good. You've worked hard today, lovelies. Go gently with yourselves. I hope you found that useful. Good.